me unmute. Okay. Well, welcome everybody to the Board of Regents Student Affairs and Student Life Committee meeting. We are live in Zoom and also over YouTube. We want to remind all of those that are with us that the Regents as well as presenters are participating in these meetings by phone and via Zoom. And we have a couple of presentations. The first one will be the student athlete mental health services with Dr. Cindy Henry and Dr. Jennifer Kraska. And I will let you take it away.
Oh, there he is. Good.
All right. So can y'all hear me okay? Yes. Okay. Beautiful. Well, hello. My name is Dr. Jennifer Kraska. I am the clinical psychology postdoctoral fellow in athletics and the lead mental health clinician over there. So Sunday is unable to attend today. So I'm just kind of take the reins on this and go through it. So thank you again for having us. The presentation is on student athlete mental health services here. Okay, so just a little bit of an overview, history of the department. Several years ago, there was a lead clinical psychologist that was hired into this position for the first time. Currently, we don't have a clinical psychologist, and I'm kind of stepped into that role as a postdoc. So it's myself and Dr. Sunday Henry. She's the director of athletic medicine and the director of Coug Health Services. She's one of the lead team physicians over in athletics, and I work very closely with her. And then under me, we also have some doctoral level trainee therapists who also do work with our athletes. So this is a really important topic that I wanted to make sure that we touched on, and that is mental health stigma in the world of sports. It's very present, and it can be a big barrier to student athletes seeking services. So student athletes have shown to underutilize mental health services compared to non-student athletes, so the general student population. And this can be due to public stigma, social network stigma, and personal stigma that exists. Oftentimes athletes, there's this kind of belief that they could be weak or that seeking therapy or treatment for mental health could impact how their team views them, how their coach views them, hold it against them in some way. I'm a former college athlete myself and definitely experienced some of that mentality, like, no, you're an athlete, push through it. Like, you're okay, you got this, suck it up, man up, some of that exists. And that can be a major barrier for athletes seeking the help that they need. So in terms of student athlete mental health, some statistics right now, college student athletes have reported higher levels of mental health concerns, including anxiety and depression, compared to the general student population. Student athletes have some unique stressors that the general students may not face, including the high demands of their sport and balancing sports and academics and their outside life. It can be really challenging. The NCAA takes an inventory of mental health from a large group of athletes, and the most recent study found that mental health concerns are up 1.5 to 2 times higher than typical in prior years. A lot of this can be related to the pandemic and other stressors that are happening right now, but in general, mental health concerns are on the rise. And mental health concerns are highest among specific demographic subgroups, including women, student athletes of color, members of the LGBTQIA+ population, and those that experience economic hardship. So they're even more at risk. So how do we reduce this stigma, this major barrier to services? So this is something that I love sharing. Professional organizations, many of those listed there, they have sports psychologists or mental health clinicians available to all of their teams at various levels too, and they make it a part of kind of routine healthcare. Mental health is just as important as physical health for athletes. So I love that it's a growing field and professional organizations are incorporating it. And I'm sure we've all seen recent news after the Olympics and such. Professional athletes really of high levels are speaking out about mental health, trying to reduce the stigma, sharing their experiences, which is great. Additionally, college athletes around the nation are also speaking up and sharing their experiences. There's a great nonprofit organization called the Hidden Opponent that is specifically dedicated to reducing stigma and promoting awareness of mental health in the college athlete population. And then what's our role in this? How do we contribute to this? How do we follow this trend? So talking about it, normalizing it, seeking support, providing support, making sure that we have those services, that we are reaching out. Those are all really great ways that we can contribute to reducing the stigma that exists. So what do our services look like here? So confidential individual counseling for student athletes, that's a large majority of my work. I work with all the different teams here, all of the athletes that we have, do a lot of the individual counseling, and how they get in touch with me can be direct contact to me, email, phone call. Additional options are telling their trainer, their team physician, their coach, they can reach out to me and then I can reach out to the athlete. And additionally, we have counseling and psychological services, which is available to all students. They can also seek care through there as well. Additional resources for our student athletes that are also resources that are available to our general student population as well. All students have access to this, but it's important, you know, like after hours, crisis services, things like that. We have a variety of different resources for them that I make sure to provide and that coaches are aware of, and just so we all have access. And so the students have access at all times. And I'll hand this one off to Shelby because she's the expert on this.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shelby McKay. I'm the Associate Athletic Director for Staff and Student Athlete Development, and I lead our Cougar Pursuit program, which includes this resource here, Behind Happy Faces. Before I even started here about 2 years ago, our student athletes have been involved with this training called Behind Happy Faces, where what we have addressed is having all of our student athletes be trained in this and starting with their first year. So we have a course called Kines 496, New Student Athlete Orientation, that's offered in the fall and the spring for all of our new student athletes, whether they're first year or transfer student athletes. So over 2 weeks in this course, we have workshops for them focused on mental health education. And it's led by our Student Athlete Advisory Committee. So these are our leaders of our department. They include 2 representatives from each of the teams that have showcased being leaders in terms of sharing information between the athletic department administrators and their teams. But it's great to have our student athlete leaders really take charge here and provide that support to the younger student athletes and newer student athletes. It's better coming from them, honestly, than coming from us, because it reduces that stigma that Dr. Casco was talking about. And we've also seen that it allows for them to be better equipped for these conversations as leaders because they are teaching it as well. So we'll start our next session of training in the next couple of weeks to continue that. And we also have some goals of sharing this in the Pullman community. So having those leaders and those first year students in the course, going out to our local schools and sharing this education as well. So that's been a goal of ours as well.
Yeah, thank you, Shelby. So Pac12 Collaboration. So as of recent, I have had the privilege of attending a monthly mental health coordination consultation group where there is a representative from each of the Pac12 schools. That's the lead mental health clinician, and we come together, we talk about the programming that we're doing, the services that we're providing, just to get ideas from each other, consult with one another, and also make sure, you know, we're adapting to the changing world that we're existing in. Additionally, there's Pac12 Summit, which Dr. Sunday Henry is going to be attending later this month, and that is kind of a holistic care around student athlete health. And there's an aspect of that that includes mental health. So she's going to be representing us there. And then additionally, we participated in Pac12 Mental Health Week, which was the first ever. That was in the fall, and there was various programming that we did with that, which was really exciting. So what did that look like? These were some of the programming opportunities that we had. So I was able to speak and provide some information to the BSAA, the Black Student Athlete Association. I talked about mental health, and there was a woman of color clinician from the community that joined me on that, and it was a wonderful opportunity. Tremaine Gaither, he works at the university as well. He gave a mindfulness workshop to our student athletes, which was also a wonderful experience. And then one day we had a coaches corner conversation, which was essentially getting coaches input about mental health, their experiences with it, their support for their student athletes in that way. And then during our football game versus Oregon State, we promoted mental health. We had it on the big screen, and the players wore mental health awareness stickers on their helmet. And that was a big target for that game, was promoting mental health awareness and reducing stigma as well. So that was a cool week. So future opportunities, we're doing a lot, which is great, and it's going really well. I think we're managing well. However, there's always room to grow. So there is an increased demand in services, with mental health concerns on the rise due to various stressors, the additional stressors that student athletes have as well. There's a large increase in demand, which probably requires a staff expansion. So right now we just have myself, which is a 1 full-time position in mental health, and that's the lowest in the Pac-12 right now. So we want to be able to meet where the other Pac-12 schools are at, and the average is 2 to 3 full-time clinicians dedicated for mental health and athletics. So we want to, go follow this trend of the sports psychology field increasing, and hopefully expand our staff in the future. That would be great. And additional mental health programming and outreach. So what that looks like is more things like Pac-12 Mental Health Week and events, and reaching out to certain teams or populations of students that the stigma is really high in. So therefore it can, they're more likely to come in and use those services. So I have some ideas for the spring, which I'm excited about to be able to put into practice. Earlier today, I was meeting with the baseball team and staff, and developing that relationship. So it's a very active task to promote and coordinate this programming, but I'm definitely excited to continue that. And these are definitely areas that we can continue to expand on in the future as well. And yeah, I welcome any questions. Again, thank you for having me. Yeah, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take a jab at it.
I have a couple of questions. So how, again, what was the number that you said you'd like to have, I guess, for staffing?
Yeah, so right now in the Pac-12, it ranges from, so we're the lowest, we just have 1 full-time, but the average is 2 to 3 full-time clinicians dedicated to student athletes solely. So it would be great to have 2, and 3 would be even better, but definitely building that up.
No, what school has the most, I guess, is what I
USC has the most. They have a very large number. They have at least 8. Some of them are trainee clinicians, so similar to my role, or even a bit younger, like practicum graduate trainee students, but they have a large staff, which is really cool.
Right. And what about the UW? What do they have?
UW has an interesting format. They have an embedded like social worker in athletics, and then they have 2 clinicians that work in like the psychiatry department but work solely with the athletes. So essentially they have 3. Yeah.
Well, I was remiss in the beginning here of noting the fact that I have two other colleagues, other regents that are on this committee, and that is Shane Wright and also Brett Blankenship. And gentlemen, do you have any questions you'd like to have answered?
I'm curious. I appreciate. Oh, sorry, Brett. Go ahead. Thanks. Our Zoom etiquette here. I'm curious. I appreciate. Thank you for coming and for sharing today.
Yeah.
Student mental health has been something of great importance on all of our campuses, and hearing about different populations that are impacted in different ways, and especially when we're looking at those intersections that you were talking about students of color and women and our LGBTQ students. And so when you start to look at these intersections, and my thought with staffing, I appreciate that you said that athletes are also able to access general services, because I can say personally, as somebody who's had a personal counselor, that sometimes it takes a while to find the right fit, right? And so
Yes. Yeah.
when you say that students can access the general counseling services, I know that there's often limitations, like only so many sessions per academic year, or things like that. Are our student athletes held to those same standards if they're looking for that different fit?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Yes. So up until this year, there was no session limits for student athletes at all. Right now, because of the staffing limit, we're following a general 12 session rule. That's at the Student Counseling Center as well. However, we are able to kind of manage it on a case-by-case basis. If there is a student athlete that needs like a higher level of care, I am able to extend that a little bit depending on clinical judgment and consultation and things like that. Especially living in a rural area, it is very hard to find outside resources in the community. That's something really big that's been a challenge for me, being new to the area too. So we want to make sure that they do have the support and we can provide that to them. So we are a bit more flexible. And within the Pac12, no universities have session limits for their athletes. So we also want to be able to follow that standard of care as well. So that's why it's a bit more flexible.
Great, thank you. And I didn't mean that to say like, just that lots of options for everybody to find the perfect fit for them. Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. So that's another thing. I working with a lot of my student athletes that identify as Black, like I have a lot of open conversations with them about them wanting to have a therapist of color and that share similar identities to them. And we would love that. And that is definitely a goal for a future direction as well, that hiring, I think that'll be a priority to try to get clinicians of color and of diversity in, so athletes will have access to people who share similar identities to them. So that's also a goal.
Great, thank you. It's so helpful to hear the intentional conversations you've been having and the intention that you're moving forward with as well. So thank you so much.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, thank you. Those are really thoughtful questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you to both of you. I think we're extraordinarily fortunate to have you both on staff. I wanted to probe some thinking. Since you mentioned the suck it up buttercup mentality a lot of athletes might have. What can we do? Systemically, I guess is the way to ask. It's one thing to say we have 6 or 8 people on staff, go talk to them if you have trouble. Versus can we all look out for each other and somehow essentially almost make it mandatory to at least meet somebody once, so they know that it's possible to be engaged and it's not out of the norm that way, rather than, I'm guessing the female athletes have a better sisterhood thing going on and support with each other than the fellas do. But I wonder if there's a way to have, rather than just say stuff is available, maybe there's a way to have personal engagement have people, know you from day one, and have it not be something extra, so to speak, but say, yeah, I met with them. They're great folks. And I'd like to meet with them again. That approach versus, hey, if you're weak and you have trouble, go check them out. Oh, that kind of thinking. I didn't articulate that very well, but I wondered if you had explored those ideas as we set this up.
Yeah, 100%. So we already are doing some of that, which is great. I think we can definitely build upon that. So in the past, when athletes come in, whether they're new athletes, incoming freshmen, or their transfer, previous to this academic year, because there was more staff, the athletes were required as part of their pre-participation, like physical and exam, they're required to meet with one of the mental health clinicians. And during that meeting, there was like a little intro, just so you can put a name to the face. And we were able to talk about our services, how to schedule, just kind of, develop that introduction, which I think was wonderful. And I wish that can continue in the future as well, because it's a really good foot in the door. Like, oh, you met with Dr. Kraska, like she was cool. Like, I feel like I'd be able to reach out to her again. So that's a really great way. Again, because of the staff shortage, there hasn't been a lot of time to be able to do that. So how I've navigated this year is I do a lot of going to teams individually, and I'll like meet with the coaches, introduce myself, and then I'll go and introduce myself to the team. So like next week, I'm going to go and speak to the baseball team and just share a little bit about our services, and they can put a face to the name. And I think I really enjoy being present. So I can go to some teams' practices or go to some games or just hang out in the training room. And that's a really good way for the student athletes to feel comfortable. Like, oh, this isn't just a mental health therapist. Like she's part of like the athletic world and the culture. So that's a little bit of the work that I do too, which is also a really fun part. So that's what we're already doing. I'm hoping in the future too, that initial meeting can be continued.
And I can add one piece here that from the culture of our student athletes, as I've noticed a strong culture around wanting to speak about mental health. Our student athlete leaders are really big about bringing it up. And me as a student athlete development professional, I have plenty of students who come to me saying, who is that person that I go to help talk about my mental health concerns? And so it's easy to direct them. So they're not shy usually to bring it up, but not to generalize. There's still a population that does need those meetings that Dr. Casco was just talking about of the beginning of the year meetings. And I foresee that continuing once that staff is fully in place.
Has the concern about mental health, I know it's grown by other athletes, that are prominent speaking out, but, at WSU, obviously it's been a deep concern because of Tyler Helinski, other things that have happened with other athletes and things like this. I'm curious too, how COVID has affected all of this as well.
It has a lot, honestly, and continues to. So, I mean, if we think about it, a lot of student athletes, they talk about COVID year and they weren't able to compete. Some student athletes were seniors. They lost their, senior year. That takes a big hit. I think the uncertainty around COVID, that's caused a lot of anxiety, not just for student athletes, I think for all of us, but particularly with them too, and their futures and their sport. And it's constantly kind of changing with the state of COVID too. It's a lot. It's a lot of pressure. So it's definitely just building and adding up, and it's a constant kind of stressor for them. So I do think it's played a large role too in the increase of mental health concerns on the rise for our student athletes and also for the general world, I think.
Yeah, definitely for the general world.
Yeah.
I guess, financially, I'm not even sure how to ask this, but I guess, you don't have a big staff, and yet you're probably, you're dealing with an issue that is, covers so much. Is is there a financial issue here to be able to bring on more staff, or what are the barriers there? And I guess what for us as regents can we do
Yeah.
to help?
Yeah. So Shelby, maybe you can help me out with this too, but I can give a little background. So our psychologist left us in August. So it was right before school started. It was at a hard time to be able to hire someone to navigate that. So we will be finally posting that position hopefully next month to hire someone for August. And then once we get someone else locked down, the hope is to be able to get funding for a second position. So that's kind of the plan and the trajectory here.
It looks like Ellen may have something to add, so I'll let you go ahead before I say anything.
Yes, please do. Please do.
Regent Serna, I just wanted to add something in. Thank you so much, Shelby and Dr. Kraska, for what you've been talking about. You know, as the regents know, this is the mental health staffing is a challenge just sort of all over. It's, you know, nationally it's a challenge. And I think COVID didn't make it any easier. And I think in university and college settings, the landscape has changed so much. The demands on the work, Dr. Kraska knows, I think, as well as anybody, how the landscape has changed so much in the last 2 decades because of the higher stress levels of our students, the pressures that they are under. Certainly that is true of our student athletes. And on a positive side, a somewhat reduced stigma, as much as there is still work to do. And we were talking about that earlier, about the need to keep addressing the stigma. And I think Behind Happy Faces is a really terrific example of a program that really is designed to get at what Regent Blankenship was asking about, is how do we sort of normalize talking about mental health? But the somewhat decreased stigma has increased the demand as well. And so, you know, I think nationally, we haven't kept up with the demand in terms of staffing and also in terms of appropriately compensating folks who are doing really, really critical and important work. And recognizing that working in college and university mental health is a specialty. And if you add on to that sports psychology in a university and college setting, it is a specialty that deserves some recognition and acknowledgement. And so I think sort of working to keep up with other sectors of mental health practice that are frankly more lucrative. And I think that's just a challenge that every university and college that I know of is facing. So I just wanted to interject that sort of in the larger context of where all of this fits in college mental health writ large.
Right.
Yes,
and one
I
question
appreciate that.
that outside of the student athlete issue, what does the university provide, I guess, for the general population? I mean, is there, you know, okay, the student athletes have the 2-week, you know, kind of orientation, but for students that are just coming to school there, is anything offered, Ellen, or what can they do?
There's a variety of programs that are offered. I know there was a slide that Dr. Kraska had up earlier that talked about all the various services that are available really across the board to any enrolled student. And there is programming at orientation. We are actually just getting ready to launch or really expand a program that is Charmaine Gaither's work in mindfulness was mentioned earlier, and really trying to sort of leverage that mindfulness-based skills building. There's been a program in our honors college and in a couple of other places there, HD 205, which is a human development class, really trying to expand some of that work out through the university. And I expect to see that footprint really increase in the next year.
We heard from Tremaine this morning, and I think it's pretty much all of the regents would like to have a course with him. So that would actually be great. Of course, Brett has his mental health cat that he has.
Love that.
It pops it in and out.
Yes.
What's the name of the cat, by the way?
Yeah, this is Jax.
Ah.
Oh,
He's got a little.
my dog's name is Jax. He's somewhere running around over here.
Well, that's
Jax has some Siamese, so I have to pay attention, or it'll come over your microphones if I, you know.
So fellow regents, do you have any other questions? This is so important, I think, overall, that especially with our world today. I wish I'd have had an opportunity for something like this when I was going to school there back in the Stone Age. But anyway, would have been nice.
Well, before we move on, Enrique, I just thank them for reporting to us again.
Right.
And I just echo that we're very supportive.
Yeah.
Whatever we can do to
Right.
help, I think.
We'll carry the message forward, definitely. So we appreciate your presentation. Good job. Really good job. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much for having us again. Like, you are helping this movement also by even just having us here. So
Oh,
thank you
I'm glad
so
we could do it.
much.
Yeah, glad we could
Yeah.
do it. It's important. Great. All right. Well, we'll let you go, but we will move on to Ellen Taylor, who you have an action item that you're going to tell us about, which I think we'll probably deal with, I think tomorrow, but go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Regent Serna. It's actually a future action item, which we will be bringing to you, I believe, at the March Regents meeting for your approval and vote and so on. So this is really the heads up so that you all have time to think it through and so on. And what the future action item is, and sorry, I'm looking off to the side, so to make sure I get all the details right. It's a proposed revision to the Washington Administrative Code, the 50426, which is the standards of conduct for students. And really, to give you some background, in August of 2021, the U.S. Department of Education published a letter clarifying its regulations for implementing Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972. And essentially, it was articulating that based on some case law from earlier in the summer, there was they immediately ceased enforcement of the cross-examination requirement of parties and witnesses in live hearings in Title IX related matters. From our perspective, this is a welcome change from the department, as this provision has really negatively impacted WSU students. Both complainants and respondents in Title IX cases find the sort of cross-examination, the face-to-face cross-examination experience to be very stressful, and has even prevented some students from being willing to participate in hearings and in the disciplinary process. What the revision to the WAC, the Washington Administrative Code, does is strike the cross-examination requirement and then simply reserializes the subsequent provisions to align them all numerically. We'll present this action item as an action item at the March Board of Regents meeting, and I know you all have an attachment so you can sort of look at that, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say that this is really great news, and I'm really glad to hear it.
Right. I was having trouble unmuting myself there. Any questions, Regent Blankenship?
None for me. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Ellen.
All right. Well, we look forward to reviewing all of this and acting on it at the March meeting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen. We appreciate it. And I think that pretty much concludes our committee meeting. We are going to take a break until 2:45 for the remainder of the committee meetings. The YouTube link for the remainder of the meetings can be found at the WSU Board of Regents website, and we'll see you all a little bit later. All right, gentlemen. Adios.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.